All right, there we go. We're back in. Thomas J. Bellezza here with the right mindset, and I'm sitting with the amazing, wonderful, talented, and adventurous Wendy Dale, author and a memoirist. What is going on, Wendy?
It's good to be here, Thomas. I love the introduction. I've never gotten such a good introduction.
I was trying to use my my voice from Saturday Night Live, where it's like, let's try to make those cupcakes. I was wondering if we could have those cupcakes, those moist. The joke with Alec, what's his name, from Beetlejuice, Alec Baldwin, and they're like, oh, the sweaty balls, whatever it's called. What is it? The meatballs, the Swedish meatballs. Do you remember that?
Oh,
maybe I'm giving away my age. I'm old. I'm an old man.
I plenty of age behind me. Let me tell you, my favorite was the NPR. They would do the NPR women. And they would they'd be very soothing.
That's who I'm doing.
Is that who you're doing?
Yeah, yeah. Hi, how's it going today? Welcome to the show.
Okay, so we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
We just have a different recollection. I don't remember Alec Baldwin though.
Yeah, he came in as a guest, and they were doing like the shreddy balls, and it's a meatball. It's a meatball.
Okay, got it.
Anyway, so let's get into it. So, you had your people reach out to my people, and we're like, hey, we'd like to be on the show. And as everybody knows, the right mindset is all about just having a nice conversation about craft, which lo and behold, that is your area of expertise is the craft side. But we also talk about the writing process and, of course, the industry as it is from your perspective, just for anyone who's joining us for the first time. And, we say perspective because like even writing a memoir, as you have done and also teach people, it is about your perspective. And it's not necessarily who's right, who's wrong, because everybody's process is different. However, that doesn't mean you can't learn from other processes and assimilate them into your structure, which is where we got Tolkien's Lord of the Ring all the way up to George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. It had to take many processes and manipulation and adjustment and learning what works for you. So that's why we do the show. And that's why I really wanted to have you on, because you have a process, you teach a process, and you wrote a wonderful book, which we'll get to, that goes over a process. And that's the whole point. So, I don't want to get into those questions where it's like, so why'd you start writing? What's your favorite thing about writing? What I like to get into is like, for anyone who doesn't know Wendy Dale, what's interesting about her story, and I'm going to give you a lead in. I'm leading you in with this. Okay. So get ready. All right?
I can't wait. I'm dying to see what you're going to say.
Okay. But what I'm saying to everyone, what's interesting about Wendy Dale, and it's interesting to me because I'm a homebody, but you roam the globe, landing in places most people wouldn't venture for, even if you paid them $1 million. But now you're helping people write out their own journeys. And honestly, I want to know, how did you go from jogging in Colombia alongside gorillas, salsa dancing with 60-year-old women roused by rum, and, of course, dodging bombs in Libya, all right, Libyan, Beirut, and now you're a writing coach. First of all, can I just say a warrior? But more importantly, what? How? Where does this? How do you go? Gorillas? You know what? Memoir coach. That's what I want to understand. Please let us in. Please let us into that world.
Well, honestly, you could blame it on my parents. So,
what's their number?
Literally. So you're referring to what I did in my book, Avoiding Prison and Other Noble Vacation Goals. And basically, it was a book that I wrote in my 20s about traveling to dangerous places and kind of all the trouble I got up to. But it all started with my parents. And the book actually opens with my parents telling me that, we're in our 40s, we want to retire early, and therefore we want to find the poorest country possible to find so that our savings stretch the furthest. So the first chapter is about them moving to Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and I go to visit them. And this is really the beginning of my travel. So, and then I just made bad decisions. If you want to, go jogging with guerrilla revolutionaries, you just make bad decisions. And you can do that in your 20s. In fact, I suggest it, because later it's hard to make bad decisions. You don't have time to recover from them. So
Which is fair. Now, did the gorillas wear the gorilla outfits because they're gorillas, or like, did they feel like it was a misjudgment on the call? Like, hey, these are gorillas, and they're like, we're not gorillas.
No, it was silent and secret, and it would be like the neighbors would be like, that he's in the FARC, right? Like it
Yeah.
would be like that. So it wasn't literally like all the gorillas.
No, no.
Like we're running in unison. So
yeah. But fun fact about gorillas: they're actually pacifist creatures. They're not prone for violence. Not that you're talking about gorillas. She's talking about gorillas.
I'm talking about GUERR.
Yeah. Different kind of gorillas. Ones that might have a drink with you.
Yeah. You're talking about apes, correct?
Yeah. I was making a joke, a pun on the gorilla elements, because Now, did you learn how to write from the gorillas, or were you always in your mind like, this should be a book, and maybe I should learn how to write a book, and therefore I'm going to write a book? Because that was the book you mentioned was your first book, right?
Well, I decided I was going to be a writer when I was in college. I was 19 years old, and I'm like, I'm going to do this for a living. So I didn't meet the gorillas until I was, I want to say 26. Right. So this is well into
you gave it some time.
Yeah. So I was in college and decided I really wanted to do this. Nerdy kid, grew up reading books my whole life and just was in love with that. I had already done some professional writing. I'd done some journalism. I actually started in ad copywriting.
Okay.
I was doing, and I kind of loved it actually. It was really challenging. We were mostly doing radio spots. And so you had to like create this world. All you have is audio. You have to create believable characters. We had to either make the audience laugh or cry, and then you have to sell a product. And I really loved it. So I did have that as a writing background, done some journalism. I had worked in corporate communications at Hughes Aircraft. I was determined to be a writer. I wasn't always doing the kind of writing I wanted to, but I was earning a living at it. So I also lived in Los Angeles, and I was surrounded by screenwriters.
Yeah. Of course.
Well, and I didn't really want to be one. So I was considered the weird one. I was
the outcast.
I really was. But I always wanted to write books. And so my parents moved to Honduras, and I was like, well, this is kind of interesting, right? And I didn't yet have the idea for the book, but I took notes because my mother's kind of a wacky character. My father is as well. So I just took notes. And I really wanted to write a humorous memoir. So I started taking notes, and then things started happening. And at the point when in the book, we're in about chapter 5, I have to say, in all honesty, I intentionally started making bad decisions because I knew it would result in a better story. I mean, because at that point I was convinced I was writing a book, and I'd started writing it. And I'm like, if I make good decisions, this is going to be so boring. Let's see where these bad decisions lead. So.
Yeah, because who wants to read about you sleeping at the Holiday Inn? They want to see you in the middle of the jungle, sweating, barely surviving on worm water, which is, everyone knows tequila. But you're right, the worm water. It's clear, it must be water. But your copy background, just for anyone who doesn't know, you're one of the main reasons you're doing these interviews for your new book, The Memoir Engineering System. But the copy element, that marketing from you, is that catchy, make your first draft, your final draft. So you could see that, your quippy, witty taglines, your play with words, your use of straight, dynamic sentence work. Excellent, by the way. I could see why you were successful as a copy editor. But speaking of that book, I'd like to, it's quite interesting and fascinating. By the way, I'm not just saying this, but you teach structure in everything, right? So that's what the book is basically talking about. Structure. But in your life, as you were even saying, you traveled as a writer and you lived in the chaos of constant movement. Bombs.
Yeah.
Did I mention bombs? I forgot. But I'm so glad you made it home. By the way, just on the side. But more importantly, I'd like to add that you found yourself in the structural chaos of memoir writing and guiding others. So, what was it about your life and adventures that led you from chaos to structural studies when it came to writing? But I'd also like to add, what would you say is the most common structural mistakes you see people obsess over instead? So 2 questions. Go for it.
Okay. 2 big questions. So this came about since you have me talking about living abroad. This was 17 years ago. I was living in the country of Bolivia, and I'd run out of money. So I had taken a writing course. I think the only writing course I ever took several years earlier from an organization called Media Bistro. I don't know if you know them. They're based in New York.
Yeah, I do know them.
They're not the, oh, do you have a story?
No. We're very positive on this show. My mic seems to be going out. What's going on? No.
You can tell me later.
We'll be right back after this break.
Right? So they had asked me several years earlier if I wanted to teach a travel writing class. And I said no, because I didn't really feel qualified, even though my memoir had been published. And it's sort of considered a travel memoir. So, but they really wanted someone travel journalism. And I just didn't feel like that was what I was good at, or that I really was qualified. So, but I was like, so when I ran out of money in Bolivia and I needed some money, I needed a job, and I didn't even have enough money to go back to the States. So I needed to find something remotely. I thought of Media Bistro, and I was like, well, they wanted to hire me once before. Why don't I suggest doing a memoir writing class? Because I feel like I know more about memoir writing than I do about travel writing. So they said yes. And honestly, this was the beginning of my education in how memoirs are constructed. Now, I had already written a memoir, but I had figured out how to structure one memoir, right? And I suddenly realized that I have to help all of these people with different stories, and I'm their guide, right? And so I think it really is different to be a writer than it is to be a teacher. So my education in being a coach, being a teacher started when I actually started doing it, right? It was 17 years ago. And what happened was I kept seeing categories of problems, right? And so everyone was writing a different book, but after a while, there were only so many mistakes that they could make. Oh, yeah. It wasn't like, every single student makes different mistakes. There really only a handful of them. So what happened was I started figuring out these principles that all memoirs followed. So it was a process of reverse engineering. It was, okay, how would I fix this error, right? And by reverse engineering it, I went, oh, there's actually a principle at work here. If you follow the principle, you won't commit this mistake in the first place. So that was how it came about. You asked me.
I also asked, what is the most common structural mistakes you see people obsessing over? And did Ron Perlman do so in his book? No.
Oh, no, I haven't read Ron Perlman's book.
Fantastic book, by the way.
Really?
Fantastic. Oh, fantastic. Really? Yeah, he even does the audio narration for it. He's so good. It's so good.
Excellent. I will check it out. Definitely.
Yeah, it teaches about the industry, and it's just really emotional. It's everything you talk about in your book. I would almost suggest confidently that he has the emotional arcs. There's something that really interesting thing you point out. I think it's chapter 4, maybe it's a little later, but you talk about the first paragraph should basically set the tone. What is the thesis? The second paragraph should introduce basically the conflict or what you'll be challenging within it. That's sort of something like you explain in your book, and then you just use the chapter to go over those 2 things, and he does that brilliantly.
Really?
Yeah. I apologize.
Yeah. Oh no! Hey, I was talking way too much. I'm glad.
No. That's what it's all about. We want to hear you talk. We want to hear. But to bring you back. So basically, what I asked you, just for the audience as well, more for the audience, is what would you say is the most common structural mistake you see people obsessing over in
Right.
you know?
Well, let me go back
Okay.
just half a step here and define structure, right? I
Go
think
for
a lot of people don't understand what it means.
it.
And when people talk about structure, what often they think of is 3 acts. So they're thinking of this, what I call global structure, which is important. You need to do that as a first step to figuring out your story, your global structure. But I think that people have this misconception of what structure actually is. And I believe that structure is present in every single sentence of your book. So structure really is synonymous with plot, and you are creating plot in every single sentence, right? So when we're talking about structure, it's not this global thing. So what structural mistakes do people make? Well, I think it's a little different in memoir writing than fiction. I
Mhm.
think so. The biggest mistake I see people make is confusing their memory of events with a story, confusing their memory of events with plot. It's so easy to do. I did it. I did it when I started writing memoir. You feel like that's plot because it happened to you,
Yeah.
right? And so you have this thing where you kind of give everything the same importance, and it doesn't, and as a result, your reader doesn't know what to take away from this.
Mhm.
And so I call this writing from memory. It's confusing your memory of events with plot. And the way to fix this, and it's really the basis of the memoir engineering system, is to break apart these memories and figure out what needs to be seen and what needs to be transitioned, right? So those are the two components that I teach people to work with to create plot. So plot really consists of using scenes and transitions in the right way. And they
Mhm.
both work really differently. So it took me 15 years to realize that these are your two components that you're working with. It's true in fiction as well, but I don't know that a fiction writer needs this information in the same way that a memoir writer does, because a memoir writer has all these memories and is trying, it's this process of elimination for a memoir writer. For a fiction writer, I think it's a little bit more intuitive, right? You start from nothing. I call it like oil painting versus sculpture. You only put on the canvas what you need as a fiction writer.
I
Right?
would
As
almost
a
push back on that. I would
oh,
say
tell
that
me. Yeah, I'd love to hear.
I would say you're not necessarily starting with nothing per se, just like a painter doesn't start with nothing. They start with an emotion or an idea or,
Ooh, nice. Yeah.
or the canvas itself. Sometimes they'll throw ink on it or paint on it and then see where they can mold it. But
Okay.
I do agree with you that a memoir comes from at least a form of memory or experience where it's almost like everything is painted in, but now you're trying to remember what you had painted. And I really like what you talk about in your book, the
Mhm.
memoir engineering system, where you ultimately say show don't tell is not necessarily memoir friendly. Show don't tell, I would also argue, is not long form narrative friendly. It should be show sometimes tell. And the reason is because show is the emotional representation of experience and choices of characters, where tell is the context, is the thing you need to understand what's going on. So you can't, you can emotion it up all you want. You can be like, oh, the stove was hot, all you want. But if we don't know what's going on, we can't relate to that emotionally. But I do like in your book that you do kind of push back on the show don't tell. But I think that's important with memoir, isn't it? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm doing a video on my YouTube channel on show don't tell as advice that could ruin your book. I can't remember the title. It's something, and I really believe that. I see so many writers get confused by this advice, and they,
yeah.
they try and show emotion, and it just reads really insincere.
Mhm.
And people are so afraid. For me, I call it objective writing and subjective writing. So
Mhm.
objective writing is anything that a video camera would pick up. So dialogue is objective. What color the couch is, what color the wall is. My mother walked toward me, with this scowl on her face. All of that is objective, right? Anyone would have witnessed that had they been there with you at the time. The subjective writing is how you create this emotional experience for your reader. It's the things that it's really, I tell people, it's what would have gone through your head at the time,
Mm.
right? That's what's interesting. So if you say to someone, I was really furious. Well, they might think, okay, well, Wendy was furious. But if I put the furious thoughts that went through my head at the time, the incredible effect is that I actually make my reader angry, not furious. You know, they're not going to, we don't want them to throw the book across the room, but they have this feeling of anger in a way that I was angry would never do. And also in a way that showing my anger would never do.
Yeah.
Wendy throws a book across the room. You visualize that, but you don't feel it. And so the real key to giving your reader this emotional experience is put those angry words that would have gone through my head, and your reader will feel angry. So that's how I don't think in terms of show, don't tell.
Yeah, and I agree with that. You know, I like how you're saying objective, subjective. When I originally, because I had a question about that, because I know in the book you talk about it, and it's very clear. But you know, as a developmental editor and a writing teacher and stuff, you know, subjective and objective comes down to what is good and what is bad / I like or don't like. You know, like subjectively, I can like something that is terrible writing as much as objectively it could be good writing and I don't like it, you know, and those are two different things. But I like that you're using it sort of like objective is what we can't argue. We can't argue that someone just said something. We can't argue that there is the curtains are blue. We can't argue that. It is what is. The subjective is the subtext. I almost would argue that you're basically saying what is underneath the lines. What are we not necessarily seeing on the page verbatim, but what are we feeling because of all the context of the subtext inferred. But right. I want to talk a little bit about the show don't tell a little bit. Like one of the things, and by the way, this in no way has to do with memoir because not my area, but also a memoir. You shouldn't be writing a story. You're not writing long form fiction. You're writing your life, as per your book is saying. You know, there are things that happen. It could be a period of your life. It could be the extension of a moment. My life in the film industry. You know, whatever.
Exactly. You don't want to write an autobiography. It's not a history of your life. You do want to take true things that happen from your life and turn them into a story. So that's the difference between memoir and autobiography.
Yeah, and the way you put it in your book, which I'm gonna talk about something almost counter to that, but you talk about in your book where it's not necessarily about writing the unfolding of a narrative. Like you're not writing a scene. You're not like, all right, what is the dialogue here? How do they like? What is the deeper show don't tell? Like you're not talking like that. You're saying a memoir should be moving through narrative, but not necessarily us watching a television show. Like we shouldn't be watching a show unfold on the page.
I actually think you should, to be honest with you.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe
I feel like a movie. I think that is really hard to do. Taking your life and figuring out how to turn it into a movie. No, I mean literally not a movie. But
well, yeah. Why are the pages moving?
Yeah, it needs to feel like beginning, middle, and end. And
well, that I agree with. Yeah. What I was saying is, you specifically talk about how it's not about writing scenes. Like you shouldn't be like a scene you're not writing long form narrative fiction in a memoir, and that is a mistake that people make that you talk about. You say some people approach it like they're writing a long form narrative. Not that you use those words, but some people approach a memoir like they're writing a fantasy book, like a fiction book, and they're like trying to write out these stories instead of focusing on what a memoir truly is, which is, as you put it, you know, it's something you're approaching it from your experiences. You're not making things up. But what the other thing is like, what don't you use and what do you use, right? That's another thing you talk about. Like you have to figure out. So we're getting sidetracked a little bit, but I wanted to say like in long form creative writing, show the way I teach it is if somebody is angry, it influences their behavior and their words. And that is different than they clench their fist. So when I talk about show, it's about the influence of how it determines the behavior of a character, because now it becomes what are the choices they make and how do they react to things, and not necessarily like they threw a book across the room, so that's showing anger. It's more like, well, how does this make them feel, and what is it going to? Are they going to now not say as much? Are they going to be short or curse? You know, are they going to be like, you know what? Yeah, sure. Whatever you want to do. You want to go to the movies? That's fine. We could do that. That is behavioral change because they are angry and not necessarily showing my least favorite. My knuckles whitened as I squeezed
Right?
my fist close. But moving on. We'll talk. Unless you want some pushback on that, or you have some thoughts on that.
I'm in total agreement with you. I get frustrated because a lot of times the examples, when you do what does show don't tell online mean?
Yeah.
It's always the like his fists were clenched, and the vein was throbbing in his neck, and right. And it just feels like, that to me is not good writing. So I love what you're saying. Absolutely.
That should be called pandemining, like in theater, they're like theater acting versus film acting versus.
Yeah, exactly.
Theater acting is big. It's like, yes, of course I'm angry, whereas, film acting is very subtle and intimate, and the smallest movement.
Do you have an acting background, Thomas?
Well, yeah, I had 20 years in the entertainment industry. I was a screenwriter. I owned theaters. Yeah, I know. I had a whole life, and then I changed it all to become an author.
So kind of like me, but not.
Yeah. I ran with gorillas, but they were CGI.
Got it. Major difference in our career track here.
Yeah. I wrote about gorillas, but I didn't necessarily hang out with them and drink the worm water. But going back to your book, now the Memoir Engineering System, make your first draft, your final draft, by the wonderful and amazing, fantastically smilelicious Wendy Dale. This is not another how-to generic book with generic formulas. I would argue that is true. I would say that this book is not one of those you buy it and it's just like, here's some generic formulas you could use. What I like is, by the way, I really love the artwork. Wait, actually, let me show the cover. Let me show the cover to the book. I love your artwork. I like that it has a 3-dimensional element to it. It is available on Amazon. You can the link will be in the description below. But I like the cardboard element. Excellent work on this. So whoever did the work, fantastic.
Jason Anscombe, incredible designer. Can I just tell you a really quick plug?
Please.
Him.
The floor is yours.
He's so good. He's like, I'm going to go to the thrift store and I'm going to buy. He actually bought old books and carved them out.
He made that and then took a picture?
Yes. And then photographed it. So it's not digitally created.
Wow.
He actually cut apart a book. I think he's incredible. And that's he bought beautiful. Those cogs online somewhere. So he cut out this book and put the cogs in and photographed it.
Wow.
So
beautiful work. Excellent. Tell him a graphic designer says fantastico.
Okay. He's really talented. Yeah.
And you know what, the other thing about this book, other than the amazing cover, is the amazing content. It's not only it's like an easy to read engineering book that like basically gets right to the point and right to the sections, and it's digestible chapters. I think there's 14. Am I right? There's 14 chapters or something like that, or 15 chapters. But it
sounds good. I think it's I changed my mind a lot. I think it's 14, and I went back and forth. Is it 6 steps or 7 steps? So, yeah.
It's one long step, but they each have small. But those 14 chapters, by the way, are just for anyone who hasn't even read the book. I recommend even just looking at the preview on Amazon. But I have the whole book, and the chapters are very digestible. It's not dense. It's idea oriented. It gives you suggestions, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but the way you present it is not like this is what you have to do. It's more like this is why you do it. And I think that's a really good element of the book is it doesn't say, for example, a generic thing would be like, you need to show, don't tell. But you're saying the reason you wouldn't show, don't tell, et cetera, is because you're taking away the truth. Like you're not really allowing things to play out in a real, authentic way. And when you explain things like that of why to do a rule or a step, I think it's more effective for the reader. So, what was it about this approach that got you writing the book? What was it a long outlining process, or was it more of a sit and write kind of like, I know what I want to write in this book?
I've never written so fast. I wrote this book in 2 months.
2 months?
But it took me At this point, I'd been a coach for 16 years. I wrote it last year. And so it was 16 years. It's funny, I started writing my first book on how to write a memoir probably 14 years ago, and because I knew some things. But I'm so glad I didn't finish that book. I'm so glad I didn't publish that book. I needed a deeper understanding. It really took me 16. What's in the book is 16 years of research, of working with hundreds of writers, reading over 1,000 manuscripts. I really needed that. So the writing of the book was really fast, but I didn't realize I was researching a book, but that really was 16 years of experience into the book. And by this point, my concepts were so clear that it just didn't take me long to write at all. And I'd worked with so many people, so I had lots of examples to use in the book, and they were so kind to give me permission to sometimes do their before and after. What a kind thing to do. Let me show the world what I used to write, right? And how I apply this concept, and here's how it changed. So,
and that's a really good teaching, skill, is being able to say, look, I know where I started. And I had to learn, I had to adjust, and I had to grow. Because even Robert De Niro didn't start out as Robert De Niro, but he did start. And your first book is not a gauge on your quality when you have 17 years, when you have teaching under your belts, when you have a new book, all these other things. So it's really nice that you would even offer to show the comparison, But more importantly, when you're writing a book, I tell people that I could write 3,000 words a day for nonfiction, because if it's something you're passionate about and something you have 17 years, like, the book series that I have, the 5-book series on the entertainment industry and how to be successful in it. That's because I lived it. I lived entertainment for 20 years. I taught, I consulted, I got hired to go and work with production companies. So it wasn't like I was like, what do I write? You just, like you said, you just sit down and just get it right out, but when you write fantasy, to get 1,000 words out in a day, it's like, what am I writing here? And how do I get this out?
I hear you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and nonfiction is, compared to memoir or fiction, you kind of know what you're going to say. It's not as creative. You want to be useful, as opposed to, you're not giving a reader this emotional journey that you're taking them on. You're teaching them something, and it's just a different part of the brain. So, yeah.
Yeah. And memoirs, what I like about memoirs is, like I work with a couple, authors and stuff who aren't writers, and they're like, could you ghostwrite this memoir for me? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And
do you do it? Yeah.
Yeah, I do it. Yeah, I'm a ghostwriter. So, but like, what's interesting is in your book, they come to me and they're thinking it's going to be a fantasy book, but it's based on their life. And I'm like, no, memoirs have a different vibe and a different feel. And it is interesting that, and by the way, just for anyone listening, it is also completely different than an autobiography. Like, a memoir is not an autobiography. So that's why I really loved your book, because there are people out there that have these, my life would make an interesting story, right? And then it's like, I want to write a memoir. And you're like, well, I don't think you're trying to write a memoir. You're trying to write that interesting story. And even with your idea about plot, like, in story, in narrative, plot is functioning as a very specific thing of things that have to happen. Plot is what must happen no matter what, right? And in a narrative, that is a completely different adventure, because you're thinking, well, how does the plot influence itself? What's the cause and effect? Am I foreshadowing? Am I seeding? What is the Chekhov's gun? Like, you're trying to think about those things. Whereas in a memoir, maybe not as much. Would you argue against that it's less about, like, all right, I got to foreshadow the evil overlord at the end that I met in Guatemala.
So I compare memoir to literary fiction, in the sense that literary fiction is driven a lot more by the main character's internal world. There's a lot more subjective writing. Commercial fiction, twists and turns, detectives uncovering clues. It's really hard to do that with memoir. But what you do want is for it to feel like a novel, but a literary novel. And literary novels don't have these twists and turns.
Yeah.
It's more of an emotional experience. So what I tell people that plot is connected events. And that really means that what happens in your book is related to the next thing that happens. Because the problem I see with memoir is that people remember things. And so it'll be, well, that day we went to Target, and the next day, let's say let's use better
Wait, that's
examples.
not of interest?
Let's take more examples, because it's not the examples. So I go running with Colombian revolutionaries, and the next day we go out to lunch. Well, there's no connection. You would never do that in a screenplay, right?
Correct.
You go running with Colombian revolutionaries. You would, let's say, they kidnap you. So then, right, something would need to happen in that scene, and the next scene is going to logically follow, right? That doesn't happen in memoir. People remember, and there's a problem with that. People remember, well, the next day, so I went running with these Colombian revolutionaries, and then the next day we went salsa dancing. Well, those are not related. And so there you go. If you have a book with just a bunch of things you remember happening, you're really going to lose your reader.
Well,
so it's a different way to think. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's this and then this and then this and then this, and you're not.
And this happened and this happened. Exactly.
Yeah. It's always been. I actually, memoirs. Now where they're talking about that, memoirs aren't about writing your whole life. You talk about that, right? Unless you're famous, of course. That's a whole other world. But I've read some amazing famous memoirs. But for the unseen average Joe, you said it's about finding the story inside the memories, as you're basically leading to now. So what a great approach, by the way, especially because you've lived through enough material to basically fill 5 lifetimes, just for the record. Okay. Bombs. That's all I'm going to say. But let's ask the hard question. For someone that hasn't had your life or is a celebrity, how should they decide what not to put in and what to put in?
So, first of all, knowing what your book is about is a huge help, right? So if you're going to write about, let's see, caring for your mother with cancer, right? So now that's going to help you tell that story. You're not telling this, you're not talking about your life from beginning to end. So you need a story, or you're going to talk about moving to Paris, or you're going to talk about, your journey to become a professional trumpet player,
of
right?
Course.
So that really, you need to start by knowing what your book's about, right? So whatever that book is about, you need to start with that. So then I just have a step-by-step process for figuring out the order in which you need to construct this memoir. So a lot of the book is teaching people how to outline, but the right kind of outline. So I said earlier that your 2 components are scenes and transitions. So you're constructing this outline based on what your scenes and transitions will be, because they function in very different ways in your book. So one of the first steps I tell people is to figure out the chronology for your book, because it's very tempting in memoir to come up with a topic, a theme for your chapter, such as, I don't know, my relationship with my mother, right? Well, the problem with doing that too soon is that you muck up your chronology. So if you have these ideas in every chapter of your book, but you don't have chronology, you don't have this sense of a search like you would in a screenplay, right? And so that's really important. First step is to first make sure that your book is moving forward chronologically before you figure out what each chapter is actually about. Because if you do it too soon, you have no chronology in your book, you have no sense of a search. So that's one of the first steps you need to take. It is really so the first step is understanding what your book is about. And the second one is figuring out just the chronology for every chapter, not even knowing what the chapters are about. So then
basically, I wake up, I shower, I eat breakfast.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think memoir, going back to this idea of literary fiction, it doesn't have to be these, running with Colombian revolutionaries. In fact, I made it funny, right? Because that was the tone I wanted. What's so important is your point of view. The world is only you see it. And And really, you can have a not so interesting life, but if you have beautiful prose, you can write an incredible memoir, honestly. That's not been an issue for me ever in anyone I've worked with, that their life was too boring. It really hasn't. I get people with all kinds of different stories, some more interesting than others. Actually, having an interesting story can sometimes be an obstacle because people want to rely on the interesting story, but
Mhm.
so too much is happening and we don't have time to live through anything because just too much is going on.
Plus, interesting stories are a dime a dozen. It's like when you're a comedian, like when I used to tour as a comic for 10 years, like people would be like, "Oh, I have a joke you could put into your set," and you're like, "Please stop."
You hate that, or someone says, "Yes, I know."
I got a story for you.
Exactly. Or they say, "We'll both get rich. Let me, why don't you? I have this great life. You write it, and we're both going to make $1 million."
And then you go, "Well, how about you pay me 40,000? I'll make that now." And then
Exactly
you
right.
could do the work to market the book and develop a brand and establish a career. People
Yeah.
think a book sells, but a book never sells. A book, and they always yeah, it does. A great book will always sell. I go, okay, here's the experiment. Write the book, finish the book, put the book in the closet, and then
Yeah.
sit and wait for people to knock on your door. And they go, "What do you mean?" I go, "Because you said a great book sells." And I said, "A great book does not sell. What you have to do is market. You have to network.
Exactly.
You have to get, like, people need to know you." And they're like, even your friends, if you go, "Hey, I wrote a book," that's not the book's fault. It sells because A, marketing, and B, networking. I have a relationship with this person. They're going to support me because they believe in my brand and who I am. So they're going to buy the book. Now, they might like the book and they might think the book is great. And now what will they do? "Hey, you should read my friend's book. It was very good," which is still not the book's job. It is marketing because this is third party introduction, which is marketing 101. Sorry, I get very passionate about that when people are just like, you just write the best book you can. And which brings me to actually something we were talking about before we started recording. I was talking about rewrites and stuff, like, because all great writing is rewriting. That's my stance. However, your book states make your first draft your final draft. But I heard you say something, and I'd like to push back with your own words. You said outlining. Now, in the process of writing, outlining is technically your first step towards a draft. So, in a sense, you're working, and I use manipulation. You're manipulating the idea. I use that in a positive way. You're manipulating the idea to become something. So, when you state make your first draft your final draft, you're not saying don't work it, right? You're not saying, like, when you finish the book, like, you just hand it in.
No, I'm really not. So I will qualify this.
Okay.
I work with a lot of people who've been working on their memoir for 25 years, right? I mean, really, like, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but I work, I've worked with several people.
Yeah.
I would say most people who come to me have been working on it for several years at least.
Mm-hmm.
So an extreme case, I think the most was 30 years, right?
Happens.
Thousands of pages, right? And so now you're almost in worse shape than having nothing. Right. It's so different. How do you edit thousands of pages?
You throw it out.
Yeah, you really do. So this is what memoir writers are doing. They don't know what they're doing, and they're just writing, because someone told them just write. Well, they took this advice to heart and they just wrote, and they did it for 30 years, and they have, thousands of pages. Well,
they need someone to tell them just stop.
Right? That should be my next book, right? Just stop. I love it. So
we can make millions of dollars. No.
I'm gonna have to credit you. Yes. So what I wanted was to be the antidote to that, right? And the idea is, if you know what you're doing, if you understand, so I really believe in principles. I really, all of these years spent as being a coach and a teacher, I was really trying to find these principles that all memoirs follow.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that Sid Field, who, like, the original screenwriting guru way back when, he really this idea that there are 3 acts and there's a climax to your book, it's pretty simple. I think mine has probably more concepts, but that was what I wanted to do. I believed that all memoirs, all story had principles. And if I could discover what they were and I could teach people principles, they wouldn't have, thousands of pages. And so the principles get applied at the outline level. So yes, and I don't like outlining. So I don't know about you. I'm not an
passionate about outlining.
Are you? Well,
I have a whole book on
Oh, perfect. Well, good. See, some people I have to convince them because I don't like outlining. I think it's boring. I love writing prose. Like, I just want to get to writing the prose. But when you say to me, hey, you are going to save years of your life by spending a month outlining this book, you are going to save years, then all of a sudden, yeah, I see the benefit of outlining. So when I say make your first draft, your final draft, I believe in learning concepts so that you don't make these mistakes that really, I want to say all memoir writers make, that I made as a professional writer when I wrote my memoir. So I'm trying to keep people, if you don't make these mistakes, you can write a book really quickly. So it's a combination of concepts, not making mistakes. I absolutely believe in rewriting your prose, by the way, but I don't want you to, I see so many people have to throw out their thousands of pages and start over. And so this idea of just write, I don't believe in it because I see people do it for 30 years, right? So just stop, really. It really is. And so I want people to write understanding what they're doing at each step of the process. And I really do believe you can write a memoir in a year if you do it that way.
Yeah.
Where instead of 30 years, right?
And I agree totally. Like, one of the things I would say is a common, oh, hey, Kat. Hey, too. Sorry, my mustache jumped off my face. All right. Who's your baby? She visits the show all the time. Where
stealing the show right now. Stealing the show right now, right?
That's all she wants. She wants pettings and she wants me to lay in the bed. She likes she just cries at the stairs. Come upstairs, lay in the bed. So I can. She's a good girl. What was I saying?
We're talking about outlining and make your first draft your final draft.
Yeah, a common thing that I see with we gotta go. A common thing we see with writers, and obviously I want, if you disagree, I'd love you to push back on it. But a common thing I see with writers is they don't know when to say I'm done. They don't know where that first draft, because I agree with you where you say the first draft should be your final draft. There should be like a version where you finish and you go, this is the book I'm going to work. This is the book I'm going to clean. This is the book I'm going to edit. But a lot of times they don't know where that book ends. And I think that's what comes into the 30 years of writing 1,000 pages, where it's like, well, what is the ending? And am I missing something? Maybe I'm missing something. So I'm just going to keep writing. Like, it's hard. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I think memoir is a little different because what I see after 30 years is a big mess. It really is, because they didn't know what they were doing, right? And so and it frustrates me because oftentimes they're really good writers, but they just don't understand structure. It is my obsession. It's my obsession because it was also what I struggled with. So understanding structure was this personal journey for me as well. So I think there is a point at which the book is good enough. With memoir, so it's not a matter of not finding the end. It's that there's no story. If someone's been working on their book for 30 years, it is a big fat mess. It really is, right? When is your book done? I don't know. I think that is a gut feeling. I think you can revise the prose forever.
Yes, you can.
Isabella Allende. I went to a reading of hers many years ago. Do you know Isabella Allende, House of the Spirits? Novelist. Chilean novelist. So
Chilean. Yes. No.
That made
there we go. Chilean. Yes.
She lives in the States. She writes in English, so she's not matter. But I asked her at this book signing, so when do you know that your book is done? And she said, you never finish a book. You just at a certain point stop writing. So yeah.
That's what I mean. Like I
What you're
think
saying.
that's what I'm saying is
Yeah.
they don't know when to stop and say, this is the book I'm going to focus on. I don't need to add more chapters. I don't need to add more limericks. I don't need to add, like, I have to make the choice as an author and say, let me refine this. And that's what she just said is exactly what I'm talking about. They don't know when to say, let me focus.
But the books I see have problems. They're not ready to stop writing. Let me tell you, they need to start over, right?
A lot of times they do. Yeah. Sometimes, like a lot of clients with me, I'm an outlining entrepreneur. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a business to me with outlining and the way I approach it and how I break it down, especially for because that's what I got hired to clean up screenplays to be like, are we hitting everything? Are all the beats being like, what's going on? So, and I don't do the 3 acts outline or the 5 or there's a 9. There's also 7. And there's a Save a Cat and there's a blah, 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 hero's journey. I don't do any of that. I have one that I work that is pretty honed to a lot of the stuff that I do. It's something that I have molded over the years from a little bit of everything. And so I'm like an outlining. That's my thing. That's I'm a guru today. So I do agree that like a lot of times they might just be doing the first step without understanding where it goes that you talk about where, all right, this is the plot. This has to happen in a transition, plot, transition. Like, but they don't understand why this is plot and why this is transition. And that's where an outline comes in. If you understand the ebb and flow of an outline, it is dictating like, how does this moment influence this moment, and how does the transition connect those two things to make sense and, as you say, move the narrative forward. So I do agree with that, but we're getting pretty close to the hour, so I have 2 more questions for you. The first one is I think it's time to ask the question, okay, the big question that friends of the author might be asking themselves about the author, which is, why should anyone pick up a memoir by someone they've never heard of? And I mean, if you're not famous, what makes a stranger want to spend hours and their hard-earned money with an author's life on the page? So what do you tell writers who worry no one will care about their story or their life?
Well, I would say, why do you go to the movies to watch a story that isn't even true, right? That's all.
My girlfriend goes for Hugh Jackman, but that's another. But yeah, I think there's a story happening in Wolverine or something.
Right. Okay. Well, other than Hugh Jackman, let's eliminate Hugh Jackman films from this equation here. So we don't have Hugh Jackman, right? We have, let's see who. So we're transported. We love stories as human beings, right? And so if fiction can transport you and make you believe that you're living through this story that didn't even happen, it can make you feel the same feelings, identify with the main character. Imagine what memoir can do, and it's actually true. So that is why you really do want your book to feel like a movie, like a novel, and it's difficult to do because you're working with real life events. You can't just make things up. So
my pushback on that though is
okay. Go for it.
Again. We're doing a little hot seating here, a little hot seating, a little devil's advocate here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. It's an Al Pacino reference. No, all right. Let's say it's a blind person. Okay. They can't see the cover and they can't see the name of the book. Okay. Now, if somebody told that blind person, hey, listen, Al Pacino wrote a memoir, they'd be like, hey, I'm at the bookstore. I can't see. Can you hand me the memoir? What I'm asking in this question is, of course we love stories. Of course we love that, right? But what is it about somebody that is a quote unquote, and I mean this in a very positive way just for the question, a nobody, like an average Joe, but they have, because everybody, and I believe this deeply, everybody has a fantastic life. There's something magical about everybody, because you can meet somebody and be like, you did what when you were what? You know? But sometimes that doesn't translate to the cover of a book or the title of a book, and someone's like, "Who's Jane?" You know, like who's Rich Malif? You know, like why do I want to read this? So I guess that's the question I'm really asking is like, which might even be more of a marketing thing, because again, we talked about that earlier. A great book doesn't sell itself. You got to tell somebody about it. You got to be like, "Hey, by the way, I wrote this thing about my time in Guam." You know, but for someone listening who has a memoir in them, how do they approach that sort of like, I have this book?
One thing I tell the people I work with is you are not chronicling your life. And I follow that up by saying, because nobody cares. And it's true. You know, I mean, that tough love, but it's true.
Yeah.
What do people care about? They care about reading a good book. So what is a good book? Well, so I have people do this mindset shift. I don't work with people who want to write books for their grandkids. I write books that are publishable quality, that someone will pay money to read. And what does that mean, right? What is a publishable quality book? So I tell people your first mindset shift needs to be, you are not telling me the story of your life. You're taking true events and you're turning them into art, right? And that really is it. So I have people think of their books as if they were a novel that someone would want to read. So we are creating that novel-like story in your memoir, though I think as a memoirist, you get there in a very different way. So one more quick half answer here.
Half answer me up about,
you're like, you have
Marvel.
pressure on me. We're like, we're almost on the hour. I'm trying to get fucking faster now. So the other thing, it really comes back to that giving a reader an emotional experience. Why do we read books?
Yeah.
You know, I want to be transported. I want a good story, but memoir is more like literary fiction. And so that emotion is created less through plot and more by putting me there with you and giving me this emotional experience, putting me inside your head. So giving this reader emotional experience, it's less about the story. It really is. Now, if you don't have a story, you'll drive your reader crazy. That's when you have structural issues. It's just a bunch of random stuff that you're giving me. That's not a story, right? But you need a story. Even sort of literary movies, what would you call them? Artsy movies, right? They're based less on plot. Art Deco movies, foreign films.
Yeah, foreign films.
No, I'm really not.
This is 6 hours. They're just laying on the bed saying,
didn't Warhol do that? Didn't you would watch for 6 hours and then finally a tear would run down the main character's cheek? Yeah, we're not doing that.
Andy Warhol filmed, I think it's an 8-hour film, showed the film in theaters, and it was just a black and white of the Empire State Building. And that's it. That's all it is. It's just 8 hours, and people paid but he's Andy Warhol, you know, he's crazy. So
they were drugs back then, though. You know, on acid.
Drugs? No.
Experience, right? Like that Empire State Building's doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So
I was waiting for King Kong to climb it. Back in the day, by the way, they had a balloon. They blew up a huge King Kong and put him up on the Empire State Building. Very funny time of our lives. That's an aside. But
no wonder you think about gorillas a lot.
I like that when people think they're chest, but it's like, it sounds like a little high pitch, like it's not even scary, you know. So it's always funny because they're like 900 pounds of. Anyway, I get bored, you know. As a writer, you got to fill your head with useless information so you can kind of partake in the adventure of discovery. But you know, even with a memoir, I have a final question. But you got me thinking. You were like, okay, you know, everybody's life is interesting, but how?
I didn't say everyone's life is interesting. I think if you're an artist, if you're an artist, you can create this emotional experience based on the true experiences from your life. Right. And so I think even a boring life can make an interesting book if there's a big if here, you're a really good writer and you know what makes prose really good. So
well, prose, writing prose is the pros. There's a lot of puns. What I'm saying is, like, if I have like a marble collection and I've been collecting marbles for say 15
years. Is this a supposition or do you really have a marble collection?
I lost my marbles many years ago.
Oh, okay.
Many people will tell you that.
Uh,
I have a red background. I'm crazy. I'm in the red room, you know. But somebody who collects marbles for 15 years, is that memoir worthy? Do you feel prose, professional prose written by pros, could possess a story with such depth that you're like, this marble story, this marble memoir is worth reading?
wait. So you kind of lost me here.
All right, I'll simplify it.
Wait, how is Marvel and like I'm thinking superheroes? I'm like, so if
no marbles, like a marble,
the story of his life,
you know, the guy with the thumb marble, you know, Thunder Marble. They collect marbles for 15 years, and it's like, I want to write a memoir about me collecting marbles.
I thought you were saying Marvel comics.
Oh no, I'm sorry, that's my Brooklyn accent. I apologize. Next, I'm gonna say water, and you're gonna be like, "There's no D in water," and I'd be like, "D, I'm saying T."
We're gonna need subtitles for this interview, right?
Every time, I assure you.
Okay, so go back. Okay, so now I understand. You love your puns too. So yeah. Okay, so we got 15 years of collecting marbles. Got it.
Marbles. Yeah. And they go, I want to write my memoir about this life of collecting marbles. Do you feel they should be like, maybe you should go fight tigers? Or do you think it's possible to write a memoir about 15 years of collecting marbles?
Well, it would depend on what happens during those 15 years, right? I mean, did you start doing this because you wanted to impress your father? Like, is the
to get girls?
To get girl? That's kind of misguided. Hey, come over and see my marble collection.
It didn't work. I picked up guitar, changed my whole life.
There you go. Yeah.
Want to see my marbles?
I think in theory, if I got a book like that, literally, if a client came to me and said, I have this book about collecting marbles. So I would probably find a different plot line, and we could get marbles in every chapter if it warranted it.
Yeah.
I had a client come to me, and he wanted to write this book about being a Jewish banjo player. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like so much fun, right? You know, like that. But as we started working on this, there was no plot in being a Jew. It's just like, and I play at gigs, and I love doing this. And you know, it wasn't like he became famous. There was no trajectory. And so we found plot elsewhere. So what we did was he moved to New York, and it was a story about all these women he was dating. Right. And there was tons
Crown
of plot.
Heights, right?
Right. So there was tons of plot there. So we still called it a book about being a Jewish banjo player. But because he has a scene, there's a little bit of that throughout the book, but the plot wasn't based on that. So
he
probably
thought it was, though, because he's like, oh, I play banjo, I'm Jewish, I'm like in my culture. But because the way you worked with him, you were able to sort of suss out the actual story,
what the plot really was. So if you came to me with a book on marbles, I'd probably interview you and say, there's probably a deeper story here that we actually care about. So if you really want to get marbles in there, we probably can, or maybe we're going to look at it. There's probably another story in there that actually would make a good book.
Now, have you ever been in a situation where you're just sitting there, you're like, I need to, you know what? You were a secret agent. And then you just, we're going to put that right there. Chapter 2, you were a secret agent who collected marbles. Let's see. Have you ever felt like we got to embellish something here? We're going to make it nonfiction. I mean, we're going to make it a fiction memoir or something because your life is boring. Have you ever had that painful conversation with somebody?
No, because I think we have different expectations for memoir. There is the fact that it's true. So there is a little bit of a lowered bar than we expect from fiction. We do expect a lot more plot from fiction.
Okay.
So
that's true.
If they have a really boring life, I'm like, stick with memoir. Just write damn good prose, right?
So. Yeah. Well, like I would say maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, I had someone come to me with a memoir idea, and I was like, yeah, let's work on it. But like every time we would discuss something, they'd just be like, I'm gonna change their name though, and also their name, and in fact, we got to change like their job, and maybe we'll make them black instead of white. I don't want people to know who I'm talking about. I go, so you're not writing a memoir.
Yeah.
You can't be, be like, we're gonna do. You know what? I'm also a giant. I'm 6'2" instead of 5'9". Okay, well then this isn't a memoir. You're not writing a memoir. Do you ever get that where like they're like, I really want to write this story, but I'm also uncomfortable with everybody knowing my life?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. That is a big challenge for memoir writers. I think the fear is really, I'm afraid to appear imperfect.
Oh,
I'm,
yeah.
you know, whereas I think we don't like perfect people, is what I tell people. We really don't. So, my memoir was based on making bad decisions intentionally. Good stories come from making bad decisions. So there's this fear of being revealed on the page. But I think the more imperfect you are, the more we relate to you. So,
I mean, yeah, rule 101 of writing is engagement is driven by conflict and tension. With we don't care that you're perfect.
Yeah.
We care that you messed up. We care that you trials and tribulations. We care that how did you learn? How did you? All right, but I do always ask the same question to every guest at the end of every show. I'll put it up on the screen, but I will also read it because that's the kind of guy I am. All right, are you ready for the tough question?
I am, and I'm glad you're going to put it on the screen just in case there's a pun. So that
It's filled. It's filled. I wrote it to the letter. Okay. What is one piece of advice you discovered about writing that completely changed the way you approach the writing process?
I honestly have to say that I did not find a lot of good advice. And it really is the reason that set me on this journey. I know that's not a great answer.
No, maybe that is the answer, where you found advice and it moved you away from it. So what was one thing?
Did. I kept getting show, don't tell, and just, I think I hate the advice. So let me tell you about the advice that sent me is just write. And I'm like, well, what do I just write? Or write a crappy first draft. But you're talking about a structured draft, right? With an outline. But people who tell you that are not talking about that. It's like, you can do it. Just write. It's your story that no one can tell. And I really see writing as an art, and I really do. It's not just, anyone can. Well, I think I think with enough experience and help, there's this idea that anyone can write because everyone has been, writing their whole life. Yeah, well, reading and writing are basic skills. That doesn't make you into a novelist, right? Or a memoirist. Right. So I think I just mostly I remember trying to understand structure. And I went to Barnes and Noble, I went to the writing section, and I just never found the advice that I was looking for, ever. Or the advice was so vague so that I couldn't apply it. So I cannot say the one tip I got was in college. I had he was actually so he said to me, he was a teacher, and he said to me, Wendy, if you want to be a writer one day, I think you could be a good one. So that did change that was like, wow, that's the first time anyone ever said that to me.
So it was like encouragement, but not necessarily advice. Like he wasn't like, this is how you should.
It wasn't really. No, I don't know that I've gotten it. I really don't.
But that's okay, because like at the same time, I think you're answering the question with, I found advice, I read advice, I heard advice, and it all made me realize I had to figure it out on my own and develop my own process, which is what the whole show is about, is ultimately no one is right or wrong, because whatever works for you is what works for you. In fact, even the stuff I teach, it's not perfect for everybody, but you have to find what is, and it's okay to break it apart. It's okay to be like, I like this, I like that, and then mold it together, because at the end of the day, to be the writer you need to be, to find your voice, your author voice, to even just get to writing, you have to say, I like what I'm doing. I'm comfortable with how I'm approaching it. I'm not stressed because, well, I didn't show enough, or I didn't just write every day, or I didn't, right? Because I like what you're saying, because a lot of that advice is so, it's such a weight on the shoulder where it's
Mhm.
like here, for example, one that I despise as is, if you don't read, you can't write, which doesn't make any sense because there are people who can write who don't read. Because like let's say you're in film and television, right? Writing a narrative is the same as writing a narrative. So it doesn't matter if it's book prose or if it's screenwriting, right? It still has to have a beginning, a middle, and end. It still has to have a midpoint conflict. It still has to have a resolution. It still has to have an ordinary world and an inciting incident. It still has to have the rising to the conflict, right? So are they saying if you don't read, you can't write screenplays? But then they're like, well, you should be reading screenplays. Just like people used to tell me, you need to learn other people's music before you can learn how to play. And the one thing I did was I never learned how to play other people's songs. And then I made a career in music for 10 years, right?
Hmm.
Because the idea to put up walls for people, that stress, that weight, you have to write every day. If you don't write every day, you'll never be a writer. Like those kind of rules. I agree with what you're saying. Like a lot of the advice people give is just it's shoulder weight. Like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I got to do exactly what they're saying, or I can't write the book that I have been dreaming of writing for 10 years. Agree? Disagree?
I would agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah. I think most advice is not helpful. Either it's too vague to be helpful, or sometimes it's just wrong. Sometimes the people using this, people just copy each other's advice. Like I see people they do, and they don't even understand it. So that has been my experience. I see more bad advice than good advice.
Yeah. And if anyone does want advice, just know that Wendy Dale's book is available.
I love it.
On Amazon. You can, her links are in the bottom. No, but Wendy, before we go, how do people find you? And remember, some people listen and some people watch. So if you have to spell things out, I recommend it.
Absolutely. So my company, we do coaching. It's called Memoir Writing for Geniuses. So you'll find probably the easiest way is to do a Google search, Memoir Writing for Geniuses. The book you can find on Amazon, do a search for the Memoir Engineering System, or you can just Google my name, Wendy Dale. So if you want, it's geniusmemoirwriting.com, but just Google Memoir Writing for Geniuses or my name, and all sorts of things will pop up. I also have a YouTube channel. Yeah, so you can go to YouTube and also Memoir Writing for Geniuses. So.
And Dale, by the way, for anyone who's listening, is Dale. So that's Dale. or Dali.
Not to be confused with the computers. Well, actually, yes. In Latin America, they call me Dale. So yes.
Dale. Well, yeah, because there's a magical E in English. So the magical E is affecting Dale, but in other languages, there is no such thing as the magic E. So
yep.
That's your little writing exercise for today, my listeners. A little magic of grammar and anyway, it's like a diphthong when letters are together, because EE makes E, EA makes E, AE makes A. Those are diphthongs,
I hope you've written a song about that.
I am. So yeah, with that though, Wendy, thank you so much for being on The Right Mindset and letting us explore some conversation together.
Thank you so much, Thomas. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, and I just want you to know, I'm going to write a memoir about this episode, and I think we should get together and make millions of dollars.
Okay, you pay me $40,000 first.
Sounds good. I'll bring the marbles, you bring the gorillas, and we'll just have a good old time.
It'll be a party.
All right, to everyone out there, I'm Thomas J. Bellezza. And as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.